If you're a college football fan, there's a good chance that you've seen this graphic on my screen right now, which is the preseason Associated Press top 25 rankings. There are 10 SEC teams ranked here in the top 25, which means 40% of the field is made up of one conference. So naturally, there's a lot of conversation of, is there SEC bias going on in the voting? And today I'm going to try to answer that question in the most unbiased way possible, without trying to, push a narrative on you, without trying to, sway you a direction, make you believe in my line of thinking. I'm just going to look at the facts. What are the voters voting? What if you look at different conferences, etc.? So here's what I've done. If you might have seen this graphic as well, which essentially breaks out every single voter, how they voted, and their affiliation school-wise. So what I've done is I've categorized every affiliation here into a few buckets. Are they an SEC voter? Are they a Big 12 voter? Are they an ACC voter, a Big 10 voter, or are they just in another bucket, so non-Power 4? And with that, I've come up with this. So essentially, all that data you're just looking at, I just got it on Excel, and then as you can see here, I have the affiliation of each voter. So as you can see, like I was saying, you have ACC, Big 10, Big 12. Some of them have multiple. And then the SEC. So other would be your G5 voters, your Notre Dame, UConn, etc. So if you look at the regular AP poll, right, this is the one that was on your screen earlier. You'll see I highlighted the SEC teams to make it easy to pop out on the eye. 10 of them here are in the top 25, and then you have 2 receiving votes in Missouri and Auburn. But let's see, okay, if we take out completely the SEC voters and we look at just the non-SEC affiliated voters, how would this look? So here you have this view. So again, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, SEC teams are ranked here in the non-SEC view. And as you can see, not a lot of them moved too much. Georgia stayed the same. Texas went from 1 to 2, but you can see the voting was super close. Was the 13-point difference, and in the regular AP poll, I think the difference was 5 in favor of Texas. So it's really close. Alabama, LSU in the same vicinity, as is Florida, South Carolina, etc. Most of these teams basically stayed in the same place. So just looking from a binary view of, are they an SEC voter, are they not an SEC voter, not a lot of change. But let's dig a little deeper. What if we look at only the SEC voters? How do they vote? Are they wildly different than the other conferences, or are they pretty close? Well, you can see at a glance, Tennessee actually drops off the top 25 and Boise State comes in. It is only 1 vote difference, so take that for what you will. But the SEC voters actually do only have 9 SEC teams ranked instead of 10, which, the all combined AP view as well as the non-SEC voters do have 10 SEC teams. So at a glance, just an interesting piece. And then you can see that the difference between Texas and Penn State does grow a little bit. A gap of 18 votes, which is still insanely close between the number 1 and number 2 here. When you move over to the Big 10 voters, you can see same exact thing. Tennessee drops off, and then you have 9 ranked teams, and then Penn State actually takes the lead over Texas by a 5-vote difference. So again, pretty close. One interesting thing, which I'll actually go over this later, but it's interesting to see which teams some conferences have higher versus others. There's some teams that specifically, I'm just going to say now, like Oklahoma, for example, there's a lot of conversation of like, hey, Oklahoma how are they so high? This is crazy SEC bias, etc. And the funny thing is SEC voters have Oklahoma as the lowest out of any conferences. All of the other conferences voters have Oklahoma higher than the SEC voters themselves. We'll actually take a look at that later here. Main takeaway here is, again, 9 teams ranked by the Big 10, and Tennessee falls off again, not as close as the SEC had them to Boise State, but still the same number in the top 25. The Big 12 is actually very high on SEC teams. You can see Penn State and Texas are actually tied for first. but a lot of teams go up to the top. You have 10 within the top 23. And you can see some of these are higher in the Big 12 view than they are in any other. Again, we'll take a little look at that in a second, but it is interesting, 10 teams here in the top 23 for Big 12 voters. And then lastly, the ACC voters, you can see they also have 10. Texas again falls to second, only 3 vote difference to Penn State, so pretty marginal. And interestingly enough, ACC is the only conference that has Georgia not in the top 5. Every other conference, the overall AP, excluding SEC, etc., all have Georgia at number 5. ACC voters have Georgia at number 6. Does it have to do with Georgia's biggest rival being in the ACC? Maybe, probably unlikely. But that's how it shakes out here. And you can see again, Tennessee barely made it in at 25. And Texas Tech is actually the team that dropped off on here. And they're in most, if not all, the other ones as well, which is interesting. And now the kind of fun part to see the difference between all these in a quick snapshot. So as we covered earlier, Texas pretty much stays within the 1 or the 2, and it's really close between 1 and 2 in all of them, between them and Penn State. And the Big 12 view has them here at number 2, but really they're tied for 1. So really it's a pretty even split between Texas and Penn State. Ohio State, Clemson all stay the same across all of them, but focusing on the SEC teams here and the kind of the focus of the video, Georgia, like I said, was 5 in all of them except for the ACC, which has Georgia in 6th. And then some of these get a little more interesting, so I'm going to try to highlight them for you to make it easier to see. So you can see LSU, they range from 7th to 9th. The Big Ten is actually the conference that's highest on LSU out of anyone. Most conferences have LSU at 9th. SEC has them at 8th, and then Big Ten actually has them ranked 7th, which I thought was pretty interesting. Alabama, you kind of see the opposite, where the SEC and the Big Ten are more hesitant on Alabama, ranking them 9th, and then you see them 7th in the Big 12, and then 8th in the ACC. South Carolina, you see some of these teams towards the middle to the bottom, there's a little bit more variability. South Carolina goes anywhere from 13th to 17th. The highest on South Carolina are actually the SEC and the Big Ten, and then the Big 12 and ACC are actually big South Carolina doubters. So it's interesting to see how that one plays out. Florida, I think, is another interesting one where, similarly to Oklahoma that I mentioned earlier, a lot of the conversation around them has been, this team is, way too hyped up. Is DJ Lagway even that good? He's always injured. How do we even know what they're going to look like? Well, SEC voters actually have Florida the lowest out of all conferences again. And it's actually the Big 12 and ACC that have Florida a little bit higher, averaging on 14th. And you can see in the AP poll, they're right in the middle at 15th. Next up, Oklahoma, which I alluded to earlier. Big difference here. So you can see the Big Ten has Oklahoma all the way up to 16th. SEC is by far the lowest on Oklahoma at 21st. Is it because of the bad first season they had? Is it because of a little bit of a bad taste with, a newcomer in the conference? I don't know. But SEC is by far doubting Oklahoma the most, whereas the other conferences seem to be a little bit higher, specifically the Big Ten, as well as the Big 12. Some older voters there that used to watch Oklahoma every year, maybe they're a little bit higher on them still, having witnessed, the past few decades of them dominating that conference. But let's keep moving along. Texas A&M. So this one's a little interesting. ACC voters are high on the Aggies. They have them all the way up to 16th, while pretty much everyone else is 19th to 21st consensus. So it's weird to see just one conference of voters like way different on A&M as compared to the rest. But who knows? Maybe the ACC voters know something that the rest of us don't. Moving on to Ole Miss. Similarly, you have the Big 12 higher than pretty much everyone else, but the ACC voters are still decently high on Ole Miss. SEC and Big 10 voters not as much, have them barely squeaking in there in the rankings. And then finally, Tennessee. As you can see, SEC and Big 10 voters didn't even have them in the rankings at all. They did have them at 26th, right outside. But it is interesting, at Big 12 voters were much higher on Tennessee. But it is a very hard team to predict, considering the QB question there. And if you look at the votes themselves, there's a ton of variability there. There's voters who had Tennessee in the top 10, and there's voters who had them completely out. There's all over the place, and understandably so. It's a hard team to predict. Before we close the chapter here on this SEC bias conversation, and I leave you with that as just the data and no takeaways of my own, because I want you guys to form your own opinions on this. I did find one more interesting fact here, and it has nothing to do with the SEC. So if you look at BYU, ACC has them ranked 22nd, Big Ten has them at 24th, and the SEC has them at 24th. But they do not make the AP poll. And the reason being is that the Big 12 voters not only did not rank BYU, they didn't give them a single vote. So they got enough votes to be in the number 22 in the ACC, number 24 in the SEC and Big Ten voters rankings combined. I believe they're 26th in the total AP poll. And yet, the Big 12 voters did not give them a single vote. And what makes it all the more interesting is that if you look at Utah, there's only one conference that has them in the top 25, and it's the Big 12. So Big 12 voters are really high on Utah and really low on BYU, whereas pretty much every other conference is the opposite. So just an interesting fact. Let me know what you guys think below. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.